She collapsed on a Paris sidewalk, barely breathing, 436 pounds alone in a foreign city. But that was the moment everything changed. Emily, a once famous Canadian writer, had come to Paris to find inspiration. Instead, she found Xavier, a quiet chef with flour-dusted hands and a heart full of patience. What began as a simple meal in a hidden bistro would soon become a journey of pain, healing, and a love that no one believed in, except the two who lived it. The city of Paris shimmered beneath a golden afternoon sun. The Seine sparkled like a river of dreams, and the Eiffel Tower stood proudly above the landscape, as if welcoming every lost soul looking for something more. Emily stood quietly on the Pont Alexandre III, her arms resting on the edge, her eyes gazing far into the horizon. She had landed in Paris only 3 days ago, hoping that somewhere amidst the cobblestone streets and butter-laced air she would find the spark she had been missing for months. A best-selling novelist from Canada, Emily was known for her sharp wit and beautiful prose, but for the past year she had written nothing but discarded drafts and empty pages. At 5 feet 10 inches tall, Emily had the presence of a goddess: porcelain skin, deep sapphire eyes, long golden hair that shimmered in the sunlight like spun silk. Her signature red lips and mascaraed lashes turned heads wherever she went. But beneath the glamour hid a quiet pain she refused to show the world. She weighed nearly 436 pounds. Her size made everyday life a struggle. Walking upstairs left her breathless. Sitting at restaurants meant apologizing for her size. Flying to Paris had required her to buy 2 seats on the plane and endure the judgmental glances of strangers. Yet, here she was, in Paris, alone, exhausted, and desperate to feel alive again. It was on her 4th day, while wandering through a quiet alley near Rue Claire, that she smelled something divine. A warm, buttery, herby aroma danced in the air like a sweet whisper, pulling her toward a cozy little bistro tucked away behind a row of lavender bushes. La Petite Saveur. The sign was hand-painted, slightly faded, and utterly charming. Emily pushed the wooden door open. A soft chime echoed, and she stepped into the warm embrace of a tiny, rustic restaurant with checkered tablecloths, old photographs on the walls, and a single man standing behind the counter. He looked up. Tall, lean, perhaps in his early 30s, with neatly combed chestnut hair and clear blue eyes that held a softness she hadn't seen in years. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms dusted with flour. He wore a plain gray apron, his presence calm and grounded. "Bonjour," he greeted gently. "Bienvenue. Table for one?" Emily smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yes, please. Your place smells like heaven." He chuckled, motioning toward a small table by the window. "Merci. It's my family's recipe. Well, it was. I'm Xavier." "Emily. Nice to meet you, Xavier." As he brought out a basket of warm, homemade bread and a plate of ratatouille, they began to talk. Just small things at first. Where she was from, what she was doing in Paris. "I'm a writer," she finally admitted, blushing slightly. "Well, I was. I haven't written a real chapter in almost a year." "Sometimes," Xavier said, placing a spoon of herb butter beside her bread, "we lose our words when we forget to listen to ourselves." Emily looked at him, surprised. "That's surprisingly profound." "I grew up with a lot of silence," he said softly. "Orphanage kids talk less. You learn to feel things before you say them." Something in her chest tightened. This man wasn't just kind. He was layered in quiet resilience. Days turned into a week. Emily found herself returning to La Petite Saveur every afternoon. Not just for the food, though every bite was a poem, but for the way Xavier made her feel. Safe, unjudged, seen. They would talk for hours, She would tell him about the books she once wrote, stories about women finding strength, love, and light in their darkest moments. He would tell her about his childhood, the struggles of running a restaurant alone, and his passion for food as an art of healing. "Do you know," he said one afternoon, serving her a tart with roasted figs and honey, "that every ingredient carries a memory? That's why I cook. I want people to remember the good." Emily nodded, her throat tight. "You make people feel at home." "You should do the same," he replied. "Write again. Tell your story." But Emily couldn't ignore the physical reality of her life. Every day, her body felt heavier. She tried to hide the exhaustion behind bright lipstick and elegant dresses, but the truth was cruel. On one brutally hot afternoon, as she sat outside the bistro, she began to feel dizzy. Her vision blurred, and a wave of heat washed over her. She stood up to speak to Xavier, but collapsed on the sidewalk before she could say a word. "Emily!" Xavier rushed to her, dropping the tray in his hand. Her face was pale, her breathing labored. "She needs help!" he shouted, waving for a taxi. "Now!" At the hospital, she lay on a stark white bed, weak and embarrassed. Xavier sat beside her, holding her hand gently. "You gave me a scare," he said softly. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered. "I've let myself go. I've been running away from everything. And now this body, it's a prison." "No," Xavier said, his eyes steady. "It's not a prison, but it's sending you a message. And maybe now's the time to listen." Emily stared at him. Her mascara had smudged, her lipstick had faded. For the first time, she felt completely exposed. "You think I can change?" "I know you can," he said, squeezing her hand. "But you'll need help, and discipline, and someone who won't let you give up." That night, Xavier stayed late at the hospital and began researching. He reached out to a specialized obesity treatment center in Paris, known for helping patients transform their lives with structured programs that included nutrition therapy, exercise, counseling, and community support. The next morning, he showed her the brochure. "Emily, this is not about being thin. It's about being well. You're a brilliant woman. You deserve to live fully. Let's do this, together." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "No one's ever believed in me like that," she said. "Well," Xavier smiled, "it's about time someone did." The first morning at the clinic was quiet. Emily stood in front of the full-length mirror inside her assigned room, wrapped in a plain white robe. Her reflection stared back, tired eyes, puffiness in her cheeks, and curves that whispered of years of emotional battles. Her usual red lipstick was gone. So was the glam. For once, she didn't feel like the stunning, confident author everyone admired. She felt like a woman starting from zero. The clinic was peaceful, located on the outskirts of Paris, surrounded by gentle green hills. Xavier had driven her there early that morning and waited while she checked in. Before he left, he placed both hands on her shoulders and looked into her eyes. "Don't measure this journey by your weight," he said. "Measure it by the strength you find along the way." Emily nodded, her throat thick. The first week was brutal. She cried after the first fitness session, barely making it halfway through. Her legs burned, her chest heaved, and her pride shattered. "I can't do this," she whispered to her therapist later that evening. "I'm not like the others. I've failed so many times before." But the therapist, a kind woman named Colette, simply smiled and replied, "Then this time, don't do it alone." Each day came with challenges: early morning exercises, bland but nutritious meals, emotional therapy sessions, and late-night journaling. Emily wrote pages filled with buried memories, the loneliness of childhood, the pressure to be perfect, the comfort she found in food when love felt too far away. Meanwhile, Xavier called every evening without fail. "How was today?" he would ask, his voice gentle. "Exhausting," she'd reply. "Good," he'd chuckle. "That means your heart's fighting." Their calls became her lifeline. He never spoke of results. He didn't care about the number on the scale. He only cared about her voice growing steadier, her laughter returning, her will rekindling. One Sunday afternoon, a surprise came. Emily was sitting under a tree in the clinic's garden, writing in her notebook, when she saw him walking through the front gate, Xavier, holding a small basket. "Are you allowed visitors?" He grinned. She stood, stunned. "Xavier, what are you doing here?" "I brought lunch," he said, lifting the basket. "Don't worry, it's approved by your nutritionist. I asked." They sat on the grass, sharing grilled chicken, quinoa salad, and fresh strawberries. It wasn't fancy, but it tasted like home. "I missed your stories," he said, handing her a strawberry. "I haven't written anything good," she sighed. "But you're living a good story," he replied, brushing a leaf from her hair. "One day, people will read about this and believe they can change too." Emily blinked back tears. "You make me want to fight." "Then fight," he said. "Not because you hate who you are. Fight because you love who you're becoming." Weeks turned into a month, then 2. The numbers began to drop, slowly, steadily. But more importantly, Emily felt lighter inside. Her knees hurt less. She could walk for longer. Her eyes sparkled again. Her skin glowed with sweat and determination. Her journal entries transformed from sorrowful confessions into declarations of strength. "I'm not perfect," she wrote one night, "but I'm no longer hiding behind lipstick. I am showing up, for me." One afternoon, as she stepped onto the clinic scale, the nurse gasped and smiled. "Congratulations, Emily," she said. "You've lost 90 pounds. Emily covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't just the weight. It was the proof that she hadn't quit, that she had power. She called Xavier immediately. "You did it," he whispered over the phone. "No," Emily replied, voice trembling. "We did it." To celebrate, Xavier invited her out for a simple walk along the Seine on her next weekend break. She hadn't been back to Paris in nearly 8 weeks. She wore a flowing navy dress, her hair in soft waves, no mascara, just her natural self. When Xavier saw her waiting by the riverbank, he stopped in awe. "You're glowing," he said quietly. "I feel free." She smiled. They walked along the river in silence, hand in hand. At one point, Xavier stopped and looked at her, emotion thick in his voice. "You've always been beautiful, Emily. But now you believe it." She turned toward him. "I do. And it's because you saw me when I couldn't see myself." That night, as they sat on the steps of Sacré-Cœur, watching the lights of Paris twinkle below, Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm not finished yet," she whispered. "I still have a long way to go." "Then let's go together," Xavier said. And in the silence that followed, with the wind brushing softly against their faces, something bloomed, real, quiet, unbreakable. Love. It was nearly winter when Emily completed her treatment. 3.5 months had passed since the day she collapsed outside Xavier's bistro. Now she stepped out of the clinic's glass doors transformed, not just physically, but from deep within. Her body was leaner, yes, she'd lost more than 132 pounds, but her spirit had grown even stronger. She stood straighter, walked without effort, and no longer dressed to hide. She dressed to feel. And yet, as Xavier pulled up in his small Peugeot to take her home, a strange silence fell over them. The air between them felt full, as if something unsaid hovered just out of reach. "You look radiant," Xavier finally said as she climbed in beside him. Emily smiled, but there was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "Thank you," she replied. "But I feel like I'm going back to a world that still sees the old me." Over the following weeks, Emily stayed with Xavier in his modest apartment above the bistro. She helped him with the restaurant, her energy brighter, her steps lighter. Tourists loved her charm, and locals adored her smile. She was like a new melody drifting through the place. But the world outside didn't embrace her changes the same way. When she posted a photo of herself with Xavier, smiling behind the counter of La Petite Saveur, the comments came fast and sharp. "You're beautiful now. Don't go back. Why would someone like you settle for a cook with no ambition? You can do so much better." Emily stared at the screen, heart sinking. She scrolled further and found comments from old friends in Canada. Even her own mother had sent a private message. "I'm so proud of your weight loss. But are you sure this man is the right match for you?" Emily clenched her jaw. Xavier wasn't just a cook. He was the reason she was alive. Later that night, as they sat on the rooftop wrapped in blankets, Xavier noticed her quietness. "You've been somewhere else all day," he said gently. She hesitated, looking up at the night sky. "People think I've changed too much, or that I haven't changed enough." "Whose voice are you listening to?" he asked. "Theirs? Or your own?" She turned to him. "Xavier, do you ever wonder why you chose me?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I was broken," she said. "I was heavy. I couldn't walk upstairs. I didn't believe in myself. Why didn't you fall for someone easier?" Xavier's voice was soft but firm. "Because love isn't measured by ease. It's measured by truth." She looked away, tears brimming. "I'm scared, Xavier." "Of what?" "That now that I'm different, I'll lose you." He reached out, took her hands in his, and whispered, "You could weigh the world, Emily, and I'd still hold you." But the doubts only grew when Emily's agent called from Canada. "Your transformation is incredible," the woman gushed over the phone. "We have an opportunity to launch a memoir, From Shadow to Shine. It's already drawing attention, and of course, we'd need you back in Toronto." Emily's heart dropped. "Back? But I live in Paris now." "Emily," her agent pressed, "this is your comeback. Don't throw it away for a man with a frying pan." That night, Xavier found her sitting alone in the dark restaurant. "I got a book offer," she said. "They want me back in Canada." He nodded slowly, emotions passing behind his eyes. "I always knew this might happen." "I don't want to leave you," she whispered. "But you do want to write again." Silence. "I want both," she said finally. "You and the book." He stepped closer. "Then take the time you need. If it's meant to be, you'll come back." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Don't you see? You are the story. There's no book without you." They held each other that night like people who didn't want the morning to come. But morning always does. Emily booked her flight. Xavier didn't try to stop her. He simply packed her a meal for the plane, rosemary chicken with wild rice and a note tucked beneath the napkin. "No matter where you go, you carry me in your story." Canada greeted her with cold winds and flashing cameras. Her memoir exploded. Interviews, appearances, photo shoots. Suddenly, she was everywhere. Emily Carter, the woman who had conquered herself. But every time she looked into a mirror, she saw the same eyes, the same soul, the same woman who once sat under a tree, sharing strawberries with a man who saw her before anyone else did. She tried to bury the ache in work, but Paris called to her like a forgotten melody. 6 weeks after she landed, she stood in the middle of a TV interview. The host smiled wide. "So, Emily, now that you've shed the weight, what's next?" Emily paused. "I'm going home." The host blinked. "You mean Toronto?" Emily smiled. Number Paris, Paris was gray and raining when Emily stepped off the plane. The clouds hung low over Charles de Gaulle Airport, casting a quiet silver light on the pavement. But to Emily, it felt like the city was holding its breath, waiting for something. Her suitcase rolled behind her as she moved quickly through customs, her heart pounding. She hadn't told Xavier she was coming. She didn't want to call. She didn't want words. She wanted to see him. to stand in front of the man who had changed her life, not with grand gestures, but with kindness, patience, and unwavering belief. Emily caught a taxi and gave the address of La Petite Saveur. Her hands shook in her lap as they passed familiar streets, the flower stalls near Rue Clay, the little bookstore she used to visit, the quiet alley where she had first smelled the food that led her to Xavier. The taxi stopped. Emily stepped out into the drizzle, the soft mist kissing her skin. Her heart thudded wildly. The bistro looked the same, warm light glowing from inside, laughter spilling through slightly fogged windows. It was early evening, and the dinner rush had begun. She pushed open the door. The chime rang, and there he was, behind the counter, in a crisp white apron, sleeves rolled up, hands dusted with flour. His head was bowed as he worked dough with practiced focus. He looked up slowly, perhaps expecting a customer, perhaps not. Their eyes met. He froze. "Emily," he whispered, as if saying her name too loudly would break the moment. She stepped forward. Her hair was damp from the rain, her cheeks flushed, her eyes shimmering. "I'm home," she said, her voice catching. He rounded the counter in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. No more questions, no more fears, just warmth, just belonging. They stood like that for what felt like forever. When they finally pulled apart, Xavier smiled through wet eyes. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." "I tried to be away from you," she said softly, "but I couldn't write a single sentence without hearing your voice." He cupped her cheek. "Then maybe we should write something together." Over the next few weeks, Emily moved back into the small apartment above the bistro. But things didn't return to what they were. They became something better. Together, they expanded La Petite Saveur, adding a second floor for a reading nook and cafe, where guests could enjoy Emily's books alongside Xavier's pastries. She created a new menu section called From Canada, with Love, with dishes from her childhood, maple glazed salmon, roasted squash soup, and fresh butter tarts. Locals began calling it the Bistro of Stories, where food fed the body and words fed the soul. When Emily's parents flew in for the opening of the new space, her mother hesitated outside the door. "This is quaint," she said, clearly unsure. Emily smiled and took her hand. "This is home." Inside, Xavier greeted them with charm and warmth, offering her mother a tiny tart filled with lavender and lemon. "I made this one for you," he said with a grin. Her mother took one bite, and tears filled her eyes. No more doubts, no more judgment, just acceptance. The wedding was held in the garden behind the bistro, under soft string lights and hanging magnolia blooms. Emily wore an off-the-shoulder ivory gown, simple and radiant. Xavier wore a dark gray suit and held her hands like she was something fragile and infinite all at once. Their vows were quiet, spoken with tears and trembling voices. "I loved you when you couldn't love yourself," Xavier said. "And I found myself because you never gave up," Emily whispered. When they kissed, the crowd of friends and neighbors, French and Canadian, cheered like family. Years later, on a rainy afternoon not unlike the day she returned, Emily sat at the window of the Bistro Café, pen in hand. Her next novel sat open on the table, half finished. Xavier walked in, wiping his hands on a towel. "Stuck?" he asked, smiling. She looked up at him, eyes bright. "Not at all." She held up the title page. "The Recipe for Love, a True Story." He leaned over and kissed her forehead. "I think I know how that one ends," she laughed. "Me too." And in the heart of Paris, in a tiny bistro that smelled of herbs and hope, love was no longer a question. It was the answer. Sometimes the journey that changes our lives doesn't begin with grand gestures. It begins in silence, in struggle, in the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, we are worth saving. Emily didn't come to Paris to fall in love. She came to escape herself, But through pain, discipline, and the unexpected kindness of a humble man named Xavier, she didn't just lose the weight that held her down. She found the strength that lifted her up. This story reminds us that love doesn't demand perfection. It requires presence. It's not about how you look, but how deeply someone is willing to stay, even when you're at your lowest. And most importantly, change begins the moment you choose yourself. No matter who you are or how far you feel from who you want to be, your story isn't over. It's only just beginning. Thank you so much for watching this story on our channel. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, emotional journeys like this one. We're honored to share these stories with you. Until next time, keep believing, keep becoming.